The film commences with a picturesque scene of a couple, perched before a camera, reminiscing about the day they met. The man is requested to share the story of how they crossed paths. His partner reassures him that it is perfectly fine to disclose the tale on camera. The world is curious about how couples with longevity manage to keep their bond unbreakable. He chuckles to himself before starting his story, admitting that his first encounter with his wife was somewhat unconventional. He recalls how she peed on him, causing his wife to interject, questioning if that's how he wanted to start the story. However, his laughter fades away as the woman shows a picture of Maggie, their beloved dog, clarifying that she refers to Maggie, who played a vital role in bringing them together. She reminds her husband of the moment that he asked her to go dancing immediately after Maggie had peed on him. Her laughter fills the room, warm and infectious. He responds with a playful tone, acknowledging that they didn't have much time for romance, his legs still soaking wet. They both laugh, reliving the spontaneity and connection that brought them together. Her eyes glimmer with love as she looks at her beloved husband, and she leans into his chest, his arm wrapped around her shoulders, pulling her closer. As the camera fades away, she reminds him that the rest is history, sealing their love story with an intimate moment of tenderness. As the camera pans across old, black and white photographs of dogs and their humans, we see glimpses of the deep connections between these animals and their owners. Dogs holding frisbees, dogs accompanying their military owners, dogs basking in the sun with their families by the lake and on the mountain. The love and loyalty that dogs show their humans is evident in every snapshot. The next scene is a jarring contrast, as we see Frankie suddenly wake up with a start, terrified by the sound of a blender in the kitchen. Melody appears, carrying a glass of juice, and apologizes for waking Frankie up early. Excitement radiates off of her as she reminds Frankie that today is the day she will finally meet her true love in person. Melody peppers Frankie with questions about what she will wear, emphasizing the importance of first impressions. But Frankie is resolute, determined to be herself and not put on a false facade for this man. She has been hurt before, and she's not willing to go down that path again. Melody looks at Frankie with a mixture of sympathy and understanding, acknowledging that everyone has their own way of approaching love and relationships. Melody eagerly anticipates the moment Frankie has been looking forward to. Her heart races with excitement as she envisions the perfect outcome. Frankie expresses her gratitude to Melody, thanking her for her thoughtfulness. As Melody departs, she mentions that she used Frankie's new loofah, but had to discard it as it was moldy. Frankie corrects her, surprised at her mistake. She informs Melody that the item in question was a sea sponge, and that it's supposed to look that way. In the next scene, Jack is seen performing push-up exercises while his furry companion sits beside him. He speaks to the dog, expressing his relief that it's the pup's day off. Jack pets the dog's head lovingly and he proposes to make breakfast for his four-legged friend. Jack, delighted, extends his hand for the dog to shake, pleased with the enthusiastic reaction. The next scene is set inside Jack's cabinet. As he walks in, a nurse named Tara greets him with a warm smile. She proceeds to inform him about the patients he needs to attend to. Jack is grateful for the update and thanks Tara for her assistance. Tara then reminds him that he needs to leave early for a meeting with his wedding planner at 4 p.m. Jack is pleased with the reminder and looks forward to the meeting. The following scene portrays Frankie sitting in her car, preparing herself for the upcoming date. She takes a few deep breaths to calm her nerves, and her eyes flicker with anticipation and anxiety. Frankie emerges from her car and takes a moment to collect herself before heading towards her date. Once she arrives, she finds herself seated across from a man who immediately compliments her on her appearance. However, the conversation quickly turns serious as he delves into her approach to motivating herself and others. Though caught off guard, Frankie tries to answer with a touch of sarcasm, hoping to lighten the mood. When she sees the man's face remain stern, she switches to a more sincere tone, discussing her work as an editor and her love of outdoor activities. As the discussion turns towards starting a family, Frankie reminisces about her ex's family and expresses her desire for that kind of closeness and affection. Frankie heads towards her dog's cage. However, the dog barks at her, so she retreats to her computer and watches a heartwarming video of a couple who have been married for 59 years. She listens intently to their story. The woman speaks about how her husband didn't like dogs, not even their sweet Georgie. But the husband interrupts her, saying that's not true and that he's always loved dogs. The woman teases him, saying he just wanted to take her out for a milkshake. Her husband chuckles and admits that may be true. As the couple banter and laugh with each other, Frankie can't help but smile and laugh along with them. The husband looks at his wife with adoration and calls her gorgeous, to which she playfully responds with skepticism. Despite the playful teasing, it's clear that they have a deep love and affection for each other. Frankie can't help but smile at the sweet exchange between them. Melody enters Jack's cabinet, holding a pile of boxes that she hands over to Tara. As Tara signs for the packages, Melody takes a moment to ask about her roommate's new dog and if Jack can be their vet. Tara nods in agreement, suggesting an initial intake checkup for the furry friend. She asks if Melody is the point of contact, to which Melody confirms, noting that she's more obsessive about her calendar than her roommate. Tara agrees, admitting her own affinity for a well-planned schedule down to the minute. The subsequent scene shows the grand wedding hall alive with the hustle and bustle of preparation. Jack and his fiancée, Stacy, along with her assistant, inspect the lavish floral arrangements that adorn the walls. Stacy's assistant says that it is going to be made of 500 meters of pink peonies. Jack is surprised and jokes that it sounds like it's going to cost a lot before he is interrupted by Stacy, who doesn't want him to be a buzzkill. Acknowledging that he is not an expert in wedding planning, Jack defers to the women and agrees that the wall is going to be posh. The assistant then asks if they are still on track for no bridesmaids or groomsmen, to which Stacy confirms that it is locked in. Jack tries to push for his best friend, Bonner, to be included in the wedding party, but Stacy shoots down the idea and the assistant shares the same thought. Jack concedes and suggests they use his real name, Travis Bernard, but there is a moment of silence before Stacy and the assistant walk away to discuss the table settings. As Jack is left standing alone, he takes in the grandeur of the wedding hall and can't help but feel a bit overwhelmed. As the night wears on and the two friends sit in the kitchen, Frankie and Melody engage in a thoughtful conversation. Frankie wonders if the new furry addition to their household likes her. Melody suggests that it's too soon to tell, as the pup has only just left the shelter and is still adjusting to his new surroundings. Frankie muses that at least the dog barked when Melody arrived, to which she playfully responds that all dogs bark at her due to her job as a delivery driver. Frankie then reads through the papers detailing the dog's preferences. Melody advises her to be patient, reminding her how long it took for her to open up to her. Melody tells her about the communicative nature and the constant chatter of her family group chat, while Frankie reveals the stark contrast of her own familial experiences, where even a simple birthday greeting is a rare occurrence. Despite the differences, Melody assures Frankie that she will always be there for her, a constant companion in the ever-changing landscape of life. Meanwhile, sitting on the edge of their bed, Jack and his fiancée Stacy exchange words, as she does her skin care routine. Jack appears despondent, and Stacy notices his distress. The impending wedding seems to be weighing heavily on him, and Stacy is quick to recognize it. Jack is concerned about the whole event. The wedding is growing too big and excessive, and he is feeling overwhelmed. Stacy is taken aback by Jack's perspective and asks him what he envisions as his dream wedding. She ridicules his idea of rolling in hay and spitting seeds in a barrel, reminding him that her father is footing the bill. Stacy seems to be more interested in the lavishness of the event, and her image with Jack than the essence of the wedding. Jack tries to explain his feelings, but Stacy is not sympathetic. She reminds him that her father paid for their expensive sports car, which she loves being seen in with Jack. Jack agrees to go ahead with the big wedding, but his enthusiasm is tempered. He suggests letting their dog sleep in the room with them after the wedding. Stacy brushes off his request, stating that the dog is happy in the mudroom. As she settles into bed and starts to snore, Jack falls silent. As Frankie steps into the living room, her eyes fall upon Tucker as he saunters out of his crate. A smile creeps across her face as she welcomes him with open arms, beckoning him to join her on the sofa. The furry creature complies, sitting down beside her as she runs her hands through his soft, luscious fur, relishing in his warmth and presence. The next day, Frankie takes Tucker for a walk, eager to soak up the sun's warm rays and let Tucker enjoy some exercise. Suddenly, without warning, the leash snaps, and Tucker bolts away. Frankie's heart lurches with panic as she sprints after him, her mind racing with worry and fear. She calls out to him in a desperate plea, her voice echoing through the deserted streets. As Frankie runs down the street in a panic, she watches in horror as a truck down the road, with Tucker directly in its path. But as the vehicle passes, she sees Jack holding her beloved dog in his arms. Relief washes over her, and she takes a deep breath. Jack approaches her and gently places Tucker back on the ground, securing his collar around his neck. Frankie is still reeling from the shock of almost losing Tucker, explaining to Jack that she had just gotten him and he had slipped out of his collar. Jack advises her to use a harness for her dog's safety, explaining that it's better for their necks and overall well-being. Frankie gratefully thanks Jack for rescuing Tucker and promises to only take him to parks from now on. Jack cautions her that owning a dog is a big responsibility, as he himself is a dog owner and works with animals professionally. Frankie nods in understanding and bids Jack farewell, taking Tucker in her arms and making her way home. Seated together, Frankie confesses her desire to Melody to visit the vet. Melody teases her, but then asks if it's okay for her to come to the vet appointment later. Frankie agrees and Melody muses on bringing floral gifts or delectable snacks, but Frankie urges her to exercise some restraint, cautioning that she hasn't even been on a proper date with the receptionist yet. Suddenly, the conversation shifts as Melody's attention is seized by Frankie's hero, the dashing savior who rescued Tucker. Melody's eyes sparkle as she gushes over the man's magnetism, to which Frankie concedes, albeit with a hint of irony. She tells her that he had offered unsolicited advice on canine safety and etiquette, leaving Frankie feeling slightly put off. Undeterred, Melody decides to take a cue from Frankie and muster up the courage to ask the receptionist out on a date, and she walks out beaming with excitement. The scene opens with Jack sitting in a cozy bar with his friend Bonner and his wife. They clink their glasses together in a cheerful toast. As they drink, Angela, Bonner's wife, expresses her gratitude towards Jack for helping Bonner prepare for his upcoming 5 Kelvin race. Bonner chimes in, joking about his initial confusion regarding the K in a 5 Kelvin. The trio shares a moment of laughter before Angela excuses herself to use the restroom. In a candid moment, Bonner asks Jack if he truly wants to go through with the wedding. Jack admits that he feels obligated to marry Stacy because they have been together for so long, even though she does not share his passions for animals and the outdoors. Bonner questions whether Stacy even likes Jack, pointing out that love without liking each other is not a strong foundation for a lasting marriage. Jack counters that Stacy and her family have been supportive of him, but Bonner argues that guilt and obligation should not be the basis of a relationship. As Angela returns from the restroom, Jack's phone buzzes with multiple messages. He realizes he has a surgery and bids farewell to Bonner and Angela, taking his dog with him as he heads out the door. As Jack enters the cabinet with his loyal 4-legged friend, Frankie arrives with Tucker and Melody in tow. They gather before the receptionist, and Jack turns around to face Frankie. A moment passes as they lock eyes, exchanging a silent acknowledgement. Frankie breaks the silence with a beaming smile, like a burst of sunlight illuminating a cloudy day. Frankie takes the lead, explaining that Jack is the one who saved Tucker earlier. Melody jokes, calling Jack a weirdo, but Frankie quickly corrects her, saying she meant to call him a hero. The group remains silent for a moment as they process the coincidence of Jack being Frankie's vet. In the following scene, Melody makes her way to the receptionist, Tara. She greets her before expressing her desire to ask a question. Tara is attentive, assuring her that she can help with anything. But before Melody can finish her thought, Dylan appears and interrupts their conversation. Tara tends to Dylan's requests, apologizing for the disruption, but leaving Melody waiting. Frustrated, Melody takes a seat and waits for Tara to return, hoping to have a chance to ask her question without further interruption. Next, we see Frankie strides into the veterinary room, surveying the surroundings with an air of curiosity. Her eyes roam over pictures of the staff and the shelves holding medical instruments. As she turns, Jack enters the room, and she greets him with a smile. Without hesitation, she inquires about Tuck's condition. Jack confirms that her furry companion is perfectly healthy and inquires about the harness Frankie had purchased for him. Frankie beams with pride as she admits to making the purchase. Then, she asks him about Tuck's age. Jack pauses for a moment before responding, indicating that he believes Tuck is about 2 years old. Frankie calculates the age in human years, eliciting a chuckle from Jack. With the diagnosis complete, Jack informs Frankie that they'll need to schedule another checkup in 6 months. She thanks him, and he responds warmly, suggesting she call him by his first name. As they prepare to part ways, Jack shares an interesting detail about his dog's behavior during Tuck's visit. Frankie listens with interest, surprised that Tucker played well with another dog, as she had been warned otherwise. The conversation takes a turn as Jack proposes a playdate for their dogs in the park. Frankie agrees, and they both express enthusiasm for the idea. Before departing, Jack mentions a recently neutered pup that will soon wake up and realize what's happened. Frankie replies with a clever pun, eliciting a laugh from Jack. She smiles, content with the interaction, as Jack makes his way out of the room. The subsequent scene, Frankie and Melody are comfortably lounging on the sofa, playing cards. Melody suddenly interrupts their conversation by declaring her admiration for Dr. Jack's good looks. Frankie nods in agreement but adds that she thinks he might be too attractive, almost intimidatingly so. As they continue chatting, Melody's mother walks in, her arms full of goodies. Melody's mother is beaming, her eyes shining with delight as she announces that she heard Frankie has met the one. She eagerly awaits the details, excited to hear all about it. Frankie looks over at Melody, who quickly explains that she had only sent a text. Frankie chuckles at the realization, amused by the sudden turn of events. She rises from the sofa and follows Melody's mother into the kitchen, where they can all enjoy the treats and share in the excitement of Frankie's newfound love. In the kitchen, the trio huddles around as Frankie leans against the counter. Melody's mom seems to sense something different about Frankie's aura and inquires about it, suggesting it might be because she met Jack. Melody cringes at her mother's frankness, but she continues, insisting that Frankie speak up. Frankie reluctantly admits that the flame between them was short-lived, with no spice. Melody comments on Frankie's tendency to run the other way as soon as she starts having feelings. Frankie teases Melody that she's too scared to pull the trigger and asks the girl from the vet's office out on a real date. Melody's mom tells that she raised her daughter better than that and advises her to go after her love. Frankie changes the subject, mentioning that she wants to throw a small birthday party for her dog, Tucker. Melody's mom likes the idea of an intimate gathering and Melody suggests that her mom come along. However, she declines, stating that she's teaching her favorite class to geriatrics at the old folks' home. Frankie tries to bring up a question about the class, but Melody's mom shuts her down, saying she is too young, and walks away while Frankie chuckles. The next scene depicts Jack and Bonner together. They are out for a run, their breasts labored and their muscles strained. Bonner suddenly stops and bends over, taking deep breaths. Jack looks over, surprised, and asks what's going on. Bonner complains about the heat, realizing he needs a water break. Jack reminds him that he's wearing a full-body sweatsuit, which probably isn't helping. Bonner asks how far they've run, and Jack tells him it's 3/4 of a mile. Bonner asks how close that is to a 5 Kelvin, to which Jack replies that a 5 Kelvin is only 3 miles. Bonner remarks that he still needs to trim a few pounds for Jack's big day, as all eyes will be on him. Jack hesitantly tells him that Stacy doesn't think he should have a best man at their wedding, due to the calligraphy artist and the number of people standing up there with them. Bonner interrupts him and asks for Jack's opinion on the matter. Jack doesn't know what to think, but Bonner tells him that it's time to figure it out, and he insists that he will stay true to Jack even after losing the best man title, but he does want to beat him in the 5 Kelvin. Jack agrees to the challenge with a laugh. He inquires delicately whether Bonner is alright to complete the final leg of their run alone, his voice laced with a hint of worry. Bonner nods reassuringly. He contemplates taking a much-needed break. But before he can even lower his body to the ground, Jack's voice echoes through the air like a warning bell, reminding him to keep going and not to rest. With a deep breath, he rises to his full height and recommences his run. In the next scene, the beautiful park is a sight to behold. Dakota and Tucker play, chasing each other and having fun, their tails wagging with excitement. Jack and Frankie stand in a stunning gazebo, surrounded by blooming flowers. They talk with bright eyes and beaming smiles, their faces lit up by the beauty around them. Jack shares how he found Dakota at a gas station, buried in a bag of barbecue chips, and how they have been inseparable ever since. Frankie is intrigued and finds it adorable, her heart warmed by the bond between man and dog. As they discuss their love for animals, Frankie reveals how she adopted Tucker as her way of doing her small part in making the world a better place. Jack admires her kindness and dedication, and agrees that humans don't always do right by their animal friends. As the conversation turns to matters of the heart, Frankie opens up to Jack about her fear of getting hurt, admitting that she has never let someone in as deeply as she wants to. She admits that the conversation went too weird and personal, but Jack reassures her that it makes perfect sense to him, and they smile at each other. Their conversation is interrupted by Jack's buzzing phone, and he apologetically cuts it short to return to the clinic. They both agree to continue their conversation on their next play date, and Frankie blushes with embarrassment at accidentally suggesting a naughty text instead of a normal one. In the following scene, Melody approaches the reception, glancing at her reflection in the clinic's windows. But to her surprise, Tara is nowhere to be found. She asks Dylan if Tara is around as she has a delivery for her. He informs her that Tara had left 15 minutes ago, but offers to sign for the delivery on her behalf. Melody questions whether Tara's schedule has changed, but her attention is diverted by Stacy, Jack's fiancée, who complains about the lack of paper towels in the restroom. Dylan suggests using the hand dryer, but Stacy refuses, citing the hot germ-filled air. Jack then enters the clinic, and Stacy greets him affectionately. Jack is puzzled, having previously told her he wouldn't be working at the clinic that day. Stacy admits that she forgot, as Jack has a last-minute tux fitting that requires snipping and sewing to make it fit his body just right. Jack expresses shock and asks if the fitting is today, to which Stacy confirms and urges him to hurry. They leave, holding hands. Meanwhile, Melody remains standing there, visibly surprised and shocked. Her eyes follow the couple as they exit the clinic, her mind racing with questions about what she had just witnessed. At home, Frankie sits in front of her computer, engrossed in her work. As she stands to collect her printed paper, she is stunned by the sight of Jack's picture with his fiancée, Stacy. She quickly returns to her seat, visibly shaken. Just then, Melody bursts in and informs her that the Dr. Jack is engaged. Frankie reveals that Stacy and Jack are her next assignment. As Frankie browses through the video of Jack and Stacy narrating how they met each other, her heart drops to her stomach. Then she quickly shuts off both the video and the computer. Melody tries to console her, but the devastation is evident in Frankie's eyes. Melody suggests that someone else should write the article, but Frankie is unsure and lost. Despite her emotional turmoil, Frankie resolves to write the piece professionally and objectively. But things are about to get even more complicated, as she is scheduled to conduct an in-person interview with Jack the following day. But Melody's eyes light up with a cunning look, and she seems to be considering something. Frankie can't help but wonder what she has in mind as she waits for her to speak. Melody assists Frankie in concealing her appearance, placing a large hat and oversized sunglasses on her head. Frankie appears almost unrecognizable with the added accessories. Melody nods approvingly at her handiwork, satisfied that their plan will succeed. Frankie arrives at the interview and greets Jack and Stacy, introducing herself as Francesca. Stacy thanks her for meeting with them, and Jack echoes her gratitude. Stacy compliments Frankie's chic scarf, and Frankie thanks her before suggesting they start at the beginning and asking for their love story. As Stacy reminisces about the fruit roll-up that Jack gave her in 6th grade, her eyes glimmer with affection. However, Frankie is not satisfied and asks for more passionate details about their love story. When she mentions their first moment of realizing their love for each other, Stacy asks Jack to tell the story. Jack is distracted by Francesca's accent and asks where she is from, to which she replies Sweden. Frankie, her head hidden under a big hat as she scribbles furiously in her notebook, prompts them to continue, and they recall the first they knew they fell in love hard in middle school. Stacy interjects, unsure if it was in college, but Jack confirms it was in middle school. Jack picks up his phone and sends a message to Frankie. The sound notification pops, but Frankie ignores it, too focused on the conversation. Stacy reminds Frankie to ensure that the names of the Prescott cousins are spelled correctly, while Jack notices that something seems off and decides to resend a message. However, as Frankie reaches for her phone to turn it off, it falls from her hand, and her sunglasses slip off her head. Jack immediately recognizes her. Stacy is surprised that they know each other, but Frankie insists that they don't. Jack clarifies that they met at the clinic because of their dogs. Stacy brushes it off, commenting on how dog people are their own subculture. As Stacy checks her phone, she shares the news that the string quartet has dropped out. She tells them to stand by before walking away. As she leaves, Jack and Frankie turn to each other, and without hesitation, ask each other why they didn't share the important news in their lives. Jack wonders why Frankie didn't tell him she was writing the piece, while Frankie is taken aback that Jack didn't mention he was engaged. Jack denies forgetting to mention something to Frankie, but explains that the topic just didn't come up naturally. He questions why she arrived with a large hat and spoke in a Mario-like voice, but Frankie reveals she's a journalist and will be asking the questions. Despite claiming to be an open book, Jack admits he failed to mention his engagement. He defends his actions, saying they only spent 2 hours together and didn't owe each other such specifics. Frankie accepts his reasoning, but notes that if she were engaged, she would have mentioned it. Jack congratulates her on her fake character, and Frankie accuses him of being smug and condescending. After their conversation is interrupted by Stacy, Jack thanks Frankie for her time and says they'll be in touch. Frankie sarcastically looks forward to writing about the two lovebirds. In the following scene, after a long run, Jack unfastens the leash from Dakota and waits for Bonner, who arrives gasping for air and babbling about donuts. Jack muses that a desirable destination can be a powerful motivator, and he reminds Bonner that cultivating the habit of daily exercise is a far greater accomplishment than reaching any particular goal. As Bonner drinks water to recover, he demands an update on Jack's upcoming nuptials, and the latter confesses to being in a difficult situation. Jack admits to feeling like he's in a pickle, a phrase that confuses Bonner. The two friends engage in a witty exchange about the terror of being trapped inside a giant pickle. But Jack is frustrated and urges Bonner to let him speak, for he must share the burden that has been weighing him down. Finally, he admits to his doubts about the wedding, and Bonner encourages him to be honest with himself. The weight of responsibility lifts from Jack's shoulders as he realizes that he must be true to his own heart, even if that means backing out of the wedding. As Jack shared his doubts with Bonner, he couldn't help but feel a sense of anxiety wash over him. The thought of calling off his wedding to Stacy, the woman he had been with for years, is daunting. But Bonner's unwavering support makes him feel a little less alone in his decision. He reminds Jack that his true friends and family will have his back no matter what. Despite his doubts, he admits that he still cares for Stacy, but knows deep down that they had grown apart. His voice trembles with sadness as he admits that he and Stacy don't have anything in common anymore. It's not an easy thing to say out loud, especially when everyone expects them to get married. In the midst of their conversation, they notice Dakota hobbling towards them on 3 legs with a wounded arm. Panic and worry set in as they rush to her side, their concern for Dakota overriding all other emotions. The next scene depicts Tara opening the clinic. Passing by to drop a package, Melody's heart races as she approaches the clinic and sees Tara inside. She takes a deep breath before walking in, hoping she doesn't look too flustered. As she greets Tara, she can't help but notice how stunning she looks in regular clothes. Tara explains that she's not wearing scrubs because she's opening the office for Dr. Jack because his dog got hurt pretty bad, and he needs to get inside the clinic to take care of Dakota. Melody and Frankie sit on the balcony, sipping tea and enjoying the warm sun. Suddenly, Frankie's expression darkens as she brings up Jack's injured dog. Melody listens empathetically, trying to offer comfort. When Frankie suggests making a Frankie Feel Better basket for Dakota, Melody's face lights up with enthusiasm, happy to help in any way she can. And they start joking around, with Melody teasing Frankie about her choice of words, and they both dissolve into laughter. Later that night, Frankie makes her way to the clinic, carrying a basket of treats for Dakota. Bonner greets her and asks if he can help her. Frankie inquires if Dr. Jack is still around and tells him about the biscuit bouquet she has brought for Dakota. Bonner informs her that Jack is still in the clinic, finishing up with some vet work. As they wait for Jack to come out, Bonner asks how Frankie knows Jack, and they introduce themselves. Just as Bonner tells her that Jack should be out soon, he walks in. Upon seeing Frankie, Jack greets her with surprise, his eyes lighting up with joy at her unexpected visit. He asks her how she knew he was there, a hint of curiosity and excitement in his voice. Frankie explains that her roommate ran into Tara and wanted to drop off a care package for Dakota. Jack is immediately touched by her kind gesture. He expresses his gratitude, marveling at the barbecue chips in the basket, telling her that Dakota will absolutely love them. Frankie, with a beaming smile on her face and a voice filled with warmth and kindness, she requests Jack to give Dakota a squeeze on her behalf. Her genuine concern for the well-being of Jack and his furry companion is palpable in the way she tells him to let her know if they need anything. As Frankie turns to leave, she takes a moment to say goodbye to Bonner, telling him that it was nice meeting him. Bonner responds in kind, and with a smile on his face, Jack bids her farewell alongside Bonner. As Bonner admires the basket, he asks if the dogs are the only ones who like each other, or if the owners do too. Jack jokingly chides him, but then hands him the basket and heads back inside. In the late hours of the night, Jack cradles Dakota in his arms, soothingly putting her to rest with a tender tone. With a heavy heart, Jack walks into the house and takes off his jacket, with a heavy sigh. When he sees his wedding costume, his heart sinks. But before he can touch the fabric, Stacy walks in, her voice sharp and critical. She looks at him with disdain and says he looks rough, instantly causing his anxiety to spike. He feels like he's barely holding on, struggling to keep up with the constant demands and expectations placed upon him. He asks her for a moment to collect himself, but Stacy's criticism only makes him feel worse. Jack longs for a sense of normalcy and understanding from her, but he feels like he is constantly being led around on a leash, unable to make his own decisions or voice his concerns. He can't help but wonder if Stacy sees him as nothing more than a follower, always bending to her every whim. Stacy is offended and argues with Jack, but he stands firm, saying that he needs to be treated with kindness and respect. As the discussion becomes more intense, the tension in the room rises palpably. Stacy's voice grows louder as she accuses Jack of going through a midlife crisis, while Jack insists that he's simply being truthful with himself. Stacy's face grows red and her words become venomous as she blames Jack of immaturity and falsehood. She storms off towards the bedroom, leaving Jack to follow in her wake, trying to continue the conversation, but she falls asleep before he can finish. Jack stands there, looking defeated and hopeless, realizing that perhaps their relationship won't make it. The following morning, Jack wakes up and looks over to find that Stacy is not next to him in bed. He rubs his eyes and stretches his arms, trying to shake off the sleep. He heads to the kitchen to make breakfast, and there he sees a piece of paper on the counter. As he picks it up, his heart sinks. It's a letter from Stacy, and he can already feel the weight of the words before he even starts reading. In the letter, Stacy tells Jack that they will never see eye to eye on the things that matter most in life. She expresses that it breaks her heart to say it, but she believes it's the end of the road for them. She informs him that she will be staying at her parents' house for a few days. Meanwhile, Frankie watches intently as Tucker remains unresponsive in his crate, despite her best efforts to coax him out. She had spent the entire night preparing for his party, with an array of leashes and treats meticulously arranged, yet Tucker remains disinterested. Desperate to motivate him, she attempts to entice him with his favorite foods, but he remains stubbornly still. A deep sense of concern washes over her as she sits by his crate, wondering what could be bothering him. Is he sick, anxious, or simply disinterested in his party? As Frankie ponders the possibilities, she watches over Tucker, hoping for any sign of improvement. Frankie is working diligently when her phone rings, and she answers it, curious about the unexpected interruption. On the other end is Nathaniel Weathers, the coordinator of the Rue Sean wedding, with some news. Her heart skips a beat when she hears that the wedding has been postponed indefinitely, leaving her without a story to write and perfectly crafted decor to go to waste. As she tries to process this sudden development, Nathaniel explains that a Prescott family PR representative had called him and told him to hold off on running anything until further notice. When Frankie asks if he knows what happened, Nathaniel hesitates but then admits that Stacy had informed him that she and Jack were no longer in an agreement. Frankie tries to remain composed as she thanks Nathaniel for letting her know and hopes that everything is okay. Despite the unsettling news, she quickly recovers and seizes the opportunity to pitch another couple for her next story and asks Nathaniel for extra decor to enhance her new story. Jack arrives at Bonner's house with his baggage and Dakota, his loyal companion, by his side. He nervously knocks on the door. Bonner greets him with a warm smile and embraces him. Jack apologizes for intruding, but Bonner assures him that he is always welcome in their home. Bonner teases Jack about being single for the first time in ages, but Jack is unsure of how to feel about it all. Despite his uncertainty, Bonner insists that they go inside and get the party started. As Dakota blissfully chews on the grass nearby, Jack and Bonner lounge by the pool. Bonner, fully submerged in the cool water, urges Jack to join him, but the latter declines. Bonner raises his drink and Jack joins in with a toast. Bonner's face lights up with excitement as he turns to Jack, eager to ask him a question that's been on his mind. Jack senses the anticipation in Bonner's voice and looks at him curiously. When Bonner asks if he thinks he would make a good dog dad, Jack immediately responds with complete confidence in his friend. A wave of relief washes over Bonner as he hears Jack's reassurance. Jack shares in the excitement, commenting on how awesome it would be for Bonner and Angela to get a dog. Bonner invites Jack again to the pool, but Jack reminds him of their plans to run later. Bonner laughs heartily and continues swimming as Jack watches him from the side with a small smile. The camera pans over the table as Frankie, Melody, and Melody's mother chat and laugh. Frankie gently scolds Melody for being glued to her phone, urging her to be present in the moment. But Melody's mind is consumed with thoughts of her lover, her heart bursting with love and longing. She can hardly contain her excitement as she shares that her lover will soon be joining her at Tucker's party. Then she remembers something important and turns to Frankie, inquiring if she had invited Dr. Jack. As she describes Dr. Jack's many virtues, his hotness, his love for animals, and his profession as a doctor, Melody's mother can't help but be intrigued. However, Frankie can't help but bring up the fact that he was engaged, a fact that muddies the waters of his availability. Despite this, Melody's mother encourages her to take a chance on love, insisting that fate has a way of bringing people together. As the conversation continues, the trio raises their glasses in a toast to the idea of fate, and the potential for love to blossom unexpectedly. Even Frankie, though content to focus on her relationship with Tucker, can't help but be moved by the idea of destiny at play. The next morning, as Jack walks towards the kitchen, he can't help but feel a strange sense of displacement in Bonner and Angela's home. He's grateful for their hospitality, but he can't shake off the feeling that he's imposing on them. However, as he approaches the couple, he sees them laughing and having fun, which eases his worries a bit. He greets them with a smile, trying to hide his uneasiness. Bonner and Angela, on the other hand, seem genuinely happy to see him. They assure him that they don't mind having him and Dakota in their home and that he's family. However, his surprise is palpable when Bonner announces that they are pregnant. He can't contain his happiness and gives them a big hug. As they all embrace, Jack feels a sense of belonging. He's ecstatic to hear the news, and he can't wait to be the best Uncle Jack ever. Suddenly, Angela reminds them that they're supposed to be training for the 5 Kelvin, and Jack quickly changes the subject, urging Bonner to get dressed and go for a 2-mile run. Bonner complains that they were having a good time talking about the baby, but Jack is focused on the run and insists that they start training. Melody descends the stairs with an aura of excitement, eager to present her date outfit to her mother and Frankie. She twirls around, exuding an air of confidence as she awaits their opinion. Frankie, with her usual quip, teasingly points out the many options she has presented them with. Her mother's reassurance that her beauty transcends her wardrobe. But Frankie, in her sincerity, affirms her beauty, leaving a warm glow on Melody's face. Suddenly, her phone rings, and she rushes to answer it, a beam of joy lighting up her features as she hears the voice of Tara. The next scene unfolds in the stadium where Jack and Bonner practice. As Bonner sits on the bench, preparing himself, Jack stands next to him, looking pensive. He initiates a conversation seeking fatherly advice from Bonner with a serious expression. Bonner listens attentively when Jack finally mentions the name of Frankie. Bonner's face lit up with excitement, his eyes sparkling as he realizes the potential between them. Despite Jack's apprehension about whether Frankie reciprocates his feelings, Bonner encourages him to text her and be cool about it. However, things take a turn when Bonner asks for Jack's phone. Jack nervously hands over his phone to Bonner, hoping for some guidance in crafting the perfect text message to Frankie. Bonner takes the phone and begins typing away. But as Jack sees the message on his phone, his heart sinks. He can't believe Bonner has sent something silly and nonsensical. He feels embarrassed, but even as he fumes with frustration, a new message comes through. As he reads Frankie's reply, a smile slowly spreads across his face, and he feels a sense of relief wash over him. In the next scene, Frankie and Jack meander alongside the glistening lake, the serene atmosphere offering a stark contrast to the uneasy conversation that encroaches upon them. Frankie can't help but bring up the topic of the Italian tuxedo, the one that belonged to Stacy. Jack, with a heavy heart, admits that it'll probably remain in Stacy's possession. As they stroll along the waterfront, Jack reveals that he wasn't entirely surprised that things didn't work out between him and Stacy. The notion of a future together was simply incongruent, their goals and aspirations failing to align. For Jack, family and the prospect of multiple children were a top priority, while Stacy envisioned a life filled with international travels and exotic destinations. Frankie and Jack make their way to a nearby bench, where they sit and continue their conversation. Frankie listens intently to him, but she feels a pang of sadness as Jack talks about his dreams for a family. She reveals that her own family life has been fraught with tragedy and distance. She adds that her parents passed away when she was young, and she and her sister have never been close, and she is left with Tuck, her dog, her closest companion. She admits to Jack that she doesn't let many people in, causing him to feel honored and hopeful for the possibility of being welcomed into her inner circle one day. After a brief moment of silence, Frankie looks up at Jack and asks him what he is doing tomorrow night. Her desire for his company is tangible as she invites him to Tucker's official birthday party, acknowledging his role in saving Tucker's life and making him a close second to the guest of honor. Despite his initial hesitation about bringing Dakota, his dog, Jack decides to come alone, much to Frankie's delight. As their conversation comes to a close, Jack playfully points out a bit of ice cream on Frankie's face, causing them both to share a moment of laughter and a genuine connection. The following scene takes place in the kitchen where Frankie prepares for Tucker's birthday party. Melody bursts into the room, full of excitement. She has finally been granted a day off and plans to go on a date with her love interest, Tara. Frankie is happy for her friend, but also a bit hesitant. Melody's optimism is contagious, though, and she insists that she's going to take a chance on love. Frankie gives her blessing, wishing her luck. When Melody is about to leave, Frankie reveals to her that she has invited Jack over for the party. Melody is over the moon at the news, and Frankie can't help but smile at her friend's enthusiasm. She admits that inviting Jack over is a small step, but it's still a leap for her. Frankie's guarded nature is slowly but surely unraveling, and Melody can see the progress she's making. As the two friends part ways, Frankie can't help but feel a sense of nervous excitement. Next, Jack walks into the kitchen. Bonner greets him with admiration. He is dressed in his best attire, the bouquet of flowers he holds representing his hope for a special connection with Frankie. Jack seems to be all set for the party and Bonner agrees, saying he doesn't even need to wish him good luck because he's confident Jack will do well. Jack thanks him and expresses his love, to which Bonner reciprocates the sentiment. As Jack heads out, he takes a deep breath, gathers his composure, and sets out to enjoy the evening. Next, Bonner is seen busy preparing dinner in the kitchen when he suddenly smells something burning. To his horror, he realizes that he forgot about the oven and the food inside is burnt. In a panic, he rushes to fix the situation. But just then, he notices that Dakota, Frankie's dog, is missing. Bonner's heart pounds with fear and Dakota is like family to Frankie and losing her would be devastating. He frantically searches for the dog, shouting his name repeatedly. He searches every corner of the house and even runs outside into the garden and around the pool, but there is no sign of Dakota. In a desperate attempt to find her, he calls Jack, hoping he can help. As he explains the situation, Bonner's voice shakes with emotion. He apologizes repeatedly for letting Dakota slip away and promises to find her no matter what it takes. With a sense of urgency and concern, he drives through the streets. He keeps his eyes peeled, scanning every nook and cranny for any sign of Dakota. He calls out his name over and over again, hoping he will hear him and come running. As Jack frantically drives around the neighborhood searching for Dakota, his phone rings and he sees that it's Stacy calling. He picks up and he explains that he can't talk right now, but she speaks up and says that she might know where Dakota is. Without hesitation, Jack starts his car and heads to Stacy's house. Jack walks into the house and sees Dakota, relieved that he is safe and sound. Jack's words are filled with a mixture of gratitude as he thanks Stacy for calling him, but insists they need to leave. However, Stacy's interruption stops him in his tracks, and he listens as she asks him if he has thought about things lately. As he admits to reflecting on his own life, his voice carries a weight of self-examination and introspection. Despite his past tendencies to follow, he also speaks proudly of his accomplishments, both in business and in caring for animals and people. With a tinge of regret, he acknowledges that Stacy never wanted to be his wife, and this realization serves as the final confirmation that their relationship has reached its end. Stacy remains silent for a moment, but then she drops a bombshell on Jack as she unveils that Plan B is underway, and calls out for Dylan from his hiding spot. Jack's face contorts with disbelief as he gazes upon Dylan. Stacy confesses that she and Dylan shared an illicit affair after the dissolution of her relationship with Jack, adding that it took place in the most unlikely of locations, the medical supply closet of the office. Dylan nervously quips whether Jack will terminate his employment, but instead of anger, Jack finds the situation hilarious, bursting into peals of laughter. Meanwhile, Frankie sits amidst the party decorations and food, her heart heavy with disappointment and sadness. She had planned every detail of this celebration, hoping to share it with Jack, but he didn't show up. The empty chairs around her only serve to emphasize her loneliness. She looks at the cake with a single candle, feeling like the only one left to make a wish. As the flame flickers, she takes a deep breath and blows it out, her unfulfilled dreams dispersing into the air. Frankie gets up from the table, her steps heavy and slow, as she walks out of the room, feeling the weight of unrequited love. On the other hand, Bonner is still frantically searching for Dakota when his phone rings, and he hears Jack's voice on the other end. Jack happily announces that he has found Dakota and that he is safe. The frantic search for Dakota had left him drained, his lungs gasping for air as he ran through the streets, but hearing Jack's voice on the other end brings a sense of calm, a reprieve from the chaos of the past few hours. Jax asks Bonner if he has been running all of this time and requests him to check the app on his phone. Bonner looks at his phone and sees the distance he's covered. His eyes widen in disbelief. He had no idea he had been running that far, and the exhaustion he feels suddenly makes sense. When he asks Jack to convert the distance to kilometers, Jack's response only adds to Bonner's astonishment. He had just run over 8 kilometers, a distance that seemed impossible to him just a short while ago. Frankie has been hoping for a fun and romantic evening with Jack, but now she is left feeling lonely and forgotten. The silence of the empty room amplifies her disappointment as she lies on her bed. Suddenly, the sound of her phone ringing startles her. It is Jack calling, but she ignores the call. Shortly after, another sound emanates from her phone, and this time she receives a voice message from Melody. Melody admits to losing track of time, missing the party, and heading to Tara's. Despite her kind words and hope that Frankie is having fun with Jack, Frankie feels ignored and forgotten, with a sense of disappointment piercing through her heart. Jack calls Frankie again, and when she finally picks up the call, Jack tries to explain that he is running late due to Dakota's loss, but Frankie cuts him off with a sad tone and tells him that he doesn't have to come to Tucker's party. Jack insists that he wants to come and makes an effort to reassure her that this isn't like other times when people have let her down. But Frankie can't shake the feeling that things are moving too quickly between them. Just 2 weeks ago, Jack was set to marry someone else. She tells him that there's nothing to fix, and that she's tired of being disappointed by others. Jack accuses her of retreating into her crate, which strikes a nerve with Frankie. She retorts that maybe she feels safe in her crate, and that it's only big enough for her. Jack pushes back, asking if she plans to spend the rest of her life alone. But before Frankie can answer, the doorbell rings. Jack stands at the door, waiting for her to open the door. As Frankie answers the door, he nervously greets her, but she coldly reminds him that he need not have come by. Jack insists, invoking the crate metaphor to suggest a co-crate situation. Despite his best efforts, Frankie is quick to shut him down, gently reminding him it is too late, and that everything is fine just the way it is. Jack's expression is one of deep disappointment, his heart heavy as he bids Frankie goodnight. As the door clicks shut, Frankie is left feeling a palpable sense of sadness as Jack shuffles his way back to his car, his steps heavy with the weight of dashed hopes and unfulfilled desires. The following morning, Frankie descends the stairs with a heavy suitcase, her determined footsteps echoing throughout the house. Tara and Melody are chatting and laughing in the living room, but their jovial mood is short-lived when they notice Frankie's presence. Melody is shocked to hear that Frankie is leaving, taking fate into her own hands. Tara quietly excuses herself to give them privacy. Melody probes, asking if Jack is the reason for her sudden decision, but Frankie assures her that it is just time for her to figure things out on her own. She is tired of hearing about happily ever after, and she is quitting her job before heading out on her adventure. Frankie then shares that she has a surprise for a sweet old couple's vow renewal at the beach before leaving. Frankie turns to Tucker's crate, calling him to come with her, but the dog remains motionless. With tears in her eyes, she asks Melody to watch Tucker, realizing that he doesn't want to come with her right now. Frankie picks up her baggage and exits the house, leaving Melody and Tucker behind with a palpable sense of sadness. Next, as Jack walks into the room, he spots Angela delicately folding baby clothes with a serene look on her face. He greets her warmly and takes a moment to admire the small, adorable garments. Angela remarks on how it's been a wild week for Jack, to which he agrees, but mentions that everyone is happy now. Angela then points out that not everyone is happy, referring to Frankie. She suggests that maybe it doesn't have to be completely over between them. He expresses his belief that Frankie isn't interested in him, and the disappointment is evident on his face. But Angela urges Jack to fight for the girl he wants, to not give up so easily on his happiness. Her voice is filled with emotion as she speaks, sharing how she has seen Jack's kindness and compassion, and how he deserves love too. In the following scene, Frankie and Nathaniel arrive at the beach wedding with a grand gesture, a wall of 500 flowers. Frankie, apologetic for interrupting, explains that she was inspired by the love story of the groom and Edna, and believes that two kind people deserve something special. The groom is overwhelmed by the gesture and expresses his certainty that Edna will be thrilled when she sees it. Frankie and Nathaniel are invited to stay for the ceremony, and Nathaniel enthusiastically interrupts to declare that they will definitely stay. The scene is filled with a sense of romanticism and grandeur, as if the very air around them is imbued with the magic of true love. The next scene takes place at the marathon, where we see Jack and Bonner near the finish line, with Jack pushing Bonner to keep going. Despite being last in the pack, they remain determined to finish the marathon. But as they come to a stop, Bonner, barely breathing, takes a moment to share a personal revelation with Jack. He confesses his admiration for Jack's athleticism and healthy lifestyle, and how he thought he could never achieve that for himself. But with a new family on the way, he has found the motivation to become a better man. At that exact moment, Jack's thoughts begin to wander to memories of Frankie. He recalls the way she used to laugh, the sound of her voice as she spoke, and the first time he ever laid eyes on her. The memories flood his mind, each one tinged with the bittersweet sting of longing. And with a great sense of determination, Jack tells Bonner that they can cross the finish line together, and celebrates their achievement. Once they cross the finish line, they both raise their arms and slap their hands together in a triumphant high five. But as Jack takes off to go for Frankie, Bonner remains on the ground, exhausted and sore from the long run. Yet he still celebrates in his own way, grateful for the new perspective he has gained from his experience. In the following sequence, the heart of Jack pounds in his chest as he runs through the streets and fields, his mind laser-focused on finding Frankie. He finally arrives at her home, gasping for breath as he rings the doorbell. To his surprise, Tara answers the door. Jack is shocked to see her there and asks what she is doing there. When he reveals that he is looking for Frankie, Melody delivers the devastating news that she has already left and is moving away. The weight of the news hits Jack like a ton of bricks. He has been holding on to the hope that he will be able to see Frankie again, but now his dreams are dashed. As he struggles to catch his breath, he asks if anyone knows when she will be back. Melody's response is even more crushing, informing him that Frankie is gone for good. Feeling defeated, Jack begins to accept his fate, even remarking on the fact that everyone at his pet clinic seems to be finding love except for him. Despite the disappointment, he congratulates Tara and Melody on their relationship. As Jack prepares to leave, Melody informs him that Frankie has one last wedding to attend, which is a small glimmer of hope. Jack realizes that the wedding is 3 miles down the beach from where he has just come. He thanks the ladies and starts to run off, but Melody insists he take Tucker the dog with him. Jack's heart races as he sprints down the streets with Tucker at his. He finally reaches the beach and spots the wedding ceremony in the distance. As he approaches from behind, his breath hitches at the sight of Frankie. Frankie turns around and spots Jack, her surprise evident on her face. As Frankie questions Jack's sudden appearance and the presence of Tucker, he insists that they talk now, unable to contain his feelings any longer. He admits his love for her, sharing his dreams of hiking the Appalachian trails together, jumping into rivers and creating memories with their future children. Frankie feels a warmth spreading through her body, and she can't help but feel drawn to him. Finally, Jack musters the courage to ask Frankie out on a proper first date, and she says yes with a huge grin on her face. Their passion ignites as Jack and Frankie share a long, passionate kiss. They can't help but laugh together, and the sound of the applause from the wedding party surrounds them. It's as if the universe is celebrating their love, and they know that they are meant to be together. Next, Bonner and his wife Angela, Jack and Frankie, and Tara and Melody gather to celebrate. Bonner takes the opportunity to give a speech as a proud and experienced member of the distance running community. Although his quotes may not be famous, his original sayings bring laughter to the group. As they raise their glasses to toast, the dogs, Dakota and Tucker, join in the celebration, playfully hiding their faces with their paws, eliciting even more joy. The final scene of the movie is a moment of pure happiness and joy. Jack and Frankie sit together on the rugged rocks, overlooking the vast expanse of the ocean, with Dakota and Tucker resting by their side. Frankie sets up the camera to capture their love story, and as they reminisce about their journey, their faces light up with a soft glow of contentment. As they walk along the beach, the soft sand between their toes, the sun sets in a spectacular display of colors, casting a warm and golden light over the world. The scene fades to black, leaving us with a feeling of warmth and joy.